Low-tech mushroom cultivation. Growing mushrooms on coffee grounds and cardboard, turning waste into calories and compost. What are mushrooms? Mushrooms are easily misunderstood as they are so diverse. Really, we are talking about the fruiting bodies of fungi. Fungi are closely related to humans. We both must fix our carbon from organic sources, unlike plants. We use strong chemicals to break down and digest our food, and we can respond intelligently to our environment. Basic terms. Hyphae, filaments or threads that weave through the substrate, exude chemicals to digest substrate and eventually link up with each other. Mycelium, a mass of hyphae, the body of mushroom in substrate. Fruiting body, what we think of as the mushroom. Spore, a genetically diverse seed. Mycelial fragmentation, genetically identical cultivation. More terms. Spawn, carrier of mycelium. Agar culture, mycelium on sugary gelatin. Liquid culture, mycelium in sugar water. Grain spawn, mycelium in cooked grain. Sawdust spawn, mycelium on pasteurized straw. Fruiting substrate, bulk substrate chosen for maximum fruit quality. Even more terms. Pasteurize, raise temperature or pH to kill competitor organisms, usually bacteria, but leaving other organisms stunned but alive. Sterilize, raise temperature to 250 degrees Fahrenheit to kill every living thing on a substrate. Pressure cooker, home canning device capable of sterilizing agar, liquid culture, grain, and sawdust. Spawn syringes, hypodermic needles full of liquid culture used in conjunction with airport jars. Carbon to nitrogen ratio, ratio of carbon to nitrogen in fruiting substrate. Gypsum, drywall, adds sulfur and helps airflow. Airport-style jar lids, canning jar lids modified for liquid culture and grain spawn transfers. So for this you need canning jars, half-pint wide mouth, drill and drill bits, polyfill or polyester pillow filling, high-temp RTV silicone, which you can find at a hardware store, and squares of tin foil for when you pressure cook. Strain selection, so what kind of mushroom are you going to grow? A variety of pleurotus or oyster mushrooms will grow on cardboard and coffee grounds in our case. Pearl oyster is very good, and in high temps, yellow, pink, and phoenix oysters grow well. It may be possible to train other mushroom species to grow on cardboard and coffee. Trying this at home is very easy once you understand the basics. And for that, you would just basically kind of breed a few generations of mushrooms to and gradually give them more and more cardboard and coffee in their diet. Here's the lowest tech method that works okay. You just simply buy oyster mushrooms at the store, cut off the stem butts, and throw them in a jar of soaked and then wrung out paper and fresh coffee grounds. The mycelium should expand from the stem butts and take over the paper and grounds. From there you can expand this spawn into a larger container of more cardboard and coffee. Unfortunately, this method is not always reliable and can be slow, allowing infections to spread. Building up the mycelium. Oh yeah, so here's how you would breed like something like a shiitake, which normally grows on wood only. Eventually, if you wanted to try to get a reishi what did I say? Shiitake? A shiitake strain, you would just gradually, start by giving it mostly wood and a tiny bit of cardboard and coffee, and then breed that strain, and over time just add more cardboard and coffee. And this is the principle. With humans, babies eat simple food and can digest more complex foods over time. Mushrooms are the same way. Start them off simple and over time introduce more complex foods. Also, just like humans, mushrooms will like food that they have grown up with. This means that if a mushroom is familiarized with certain substrates, they will be able to digest it more quickly. Mushroom food timeline. So here's the timeline in like a typical mushroom lab. You'll start with a fresh tissue sample or spores to agar, then agar to liquid culture to grain, and then possibly grain to sawdust, and then sawdust to your fruiting substrate. And again, in this case, our fruiting substrate is the cardboard and coffee. So for our purposes, we'll skip agar. It's unnecessary for what we're doing. We'll start with liquid culture. You can buy a liquid culture syringe on eBay for about $12. From there, you can expand it to make gallons and gallons of your own for basically free. There's all kinds of strains available, and I have some if you want any. I've got them for $10. And when you expand your liquid, so when you get your syringe, basically you take your airport jar lid, or your airport jar with the modified lid. You add 500 milliliters of clean water, 1.5 tablespoons of dried malt extract, which is corn sugar, or not corn sugar, it's malt sugar, which is malted barley. You can get it at the homebrew shop or online. 1.5 tablespoons dextrose, and now that's corn sugar. That's also available at the homebrew store or online, and those are both just very simple sugars. Homebrewing is basically, or brewing, is basically cultivating a fungi, yeast, except once then at the end of that, you don't consume the fungi, you consume the liquid that it's modified. And in our case, we are going to be actually growing the fungi and then consuming the bodies itself. Liquid culture. Mix everything except the broken glass into an airport-style jar. Cover jar lid with tin foil to prevent water from dripping onto the polyfill. Sterilize at 15 psi for 10 minutes. Cool. Pour contents through a coffee filter and refill airport jar with filtered liquid culture and broken glass. Now sterilize that again for 15 psi at 15 minutes. And once it's cooled, clean injection port, that's the RTV silicone, and needle with 70% alcohol. Inject liquid culture into jar. After 2 days, swirl jars to oxygenate the culture. You will see the hyphae spread through the water. I usually do 2 to 3 jars per syringe to make in case my technique invites infection into a jar. And you will get infections, so just use it's so cheap just to make a whole bunch. Aeration and time frame. So after 3 to 4 days, when the culture is becoming visible in the liquid, swirl the jars to aerate it. The broken glass will help chop up the hyphae, encouraging them to expand. And after 14 days, you'll probably be able to, you'll see a big cloud, a big clump of the mushroom floating in there, and then you can expand to more liquid culture or inoculate grain. And here's how you make grain spawn. When you have your liquid culture expanded, you can expand it even more onto grain spawn. Just buy whatever grain is cheapest. I usually get organic rye or winter wheat from the food hole. That's Whole Food bulk bins. About $1.39 a pound, $1.50 a pound for the organic stuff. Soak grain for 12 hours in water and splash. Soak grain for 12 hours. Oh yeah, okay. So you can soak it, or just boil it till it's a little tougher than al dente. And then remember, the dry grain will expand double. So, guys, this is an old document that I just found, so I'm doing some editing on the fly. Nowadays, I do 1.5 cups of dry grain to get 3 cups of grain into the jar. So once you've cooked the stuff to al dente, a little harder than al dente, you Mix in a bit of gypsum, and then add 3 cups to each airport jar. You close the airport jar. You put the tin foil on top to prevent dripping onto the polyfill, and then you cook that at 15 psi for 75 minutes. Let cool overnight. Inject liquid culture through injection port. Shake after 30% of the jar has been myceliated. So that means once you see the mycelium spread and it's at 30%, shake it to encourage growth. And then 10 days to a month for what's called the spawn run. And that's basically when the mushroom just cultivates through the jar. Let the mushroom fruit from the grain. Oh yeah, so from here you can let the mushroom just fruit right on the grain, which it works, but it's expensive. It's much more price efficient to expand to so it's much more price efficient to expand it to the fruiting sub. So, but you can also expand to more grain. You can do grain to grain or grain to sawdust, and then from there you can inoculate your coffee at like a 1-to-5 ratio. So if you have a 5-gallon bucket, no, that's not right. You can do way higher ratios. You can do like a 1-to-20, because I'll usually use a pint jar in a 5-gallon bucket, or like not even a full pint jar. And so coffee grounds and cardboard. Finally, we're getting to this part. They're free and abundant in urban areas. Cardboard is the carbon of our recipe. It's very stable, and we don't have to worry about cleaning it too much. Just soak the cardboard in cold water until it's soaked all the way through. And this is going to be about 80%. We want an 80% carbon, 80-20 carbon nitrogen, so 80% cardboard. Coffee grounds is the nitrogen. It is unstable and attracts bacteria quickly, so you should be used quickly after brewing. What I do is I just have a plastic bag in the freezer, and as soon as I brewed the coffee, I keep throwing the grounds right into the freezer so they stay free of bacteria. It's about 20% of our substrate. And when I say coffee grounds, it's like the used, spent grounds of coffee after hot water's been passed through them. And this hot water is our pasteurization method. A fruiting container, you can really just use almost anything. Plastic bags, jars, buckets, laundry baskets, anything that will hold the substrate. I usually use 5-gallon buckets drilled with 1/4 to 1/2 inch holes. Just 1/2 inch holes or so will let the mushrooms pop out. Remember the 80-20 ratio. So here's how you pack it. You pack it a few inches of cardboard on the bottom of the bucket, then sprinkle coffee in a small pile in the middle. Then sprinkle grain spawn around the perimeter of the bucket. By keeping the coffee surrounded by grain spawn, it's easier to prevent infection. Because if you have coffee grounds right by the drilled hole, then you'll see that gets infected with your blue mold very quickly. So keep it inside. And then you can close the lid tightly or put a brick on top. Fruiting should occur in about 1 to 6 weeks. I keep the buckets outside under a plastic tarp, and spray them occasionally with the hose. But you'll get a lot of bugs because the 5-gallon buckets have like a lip around the rim, and you'll get bugs. And you'll get actually 3 flushes. The first one will be big, the second one smaller, and the third one it'll be a little less.